The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Self-Determination, an Alternative to Standard Regional Center Services. I'm Allie Barclay, and I serve as the Family Engagement Manager for Family Voices of California, and I will be hosting today's webinar. Before I introduce our presenter, Chris, I'd like to share a little bit about Family Voices of California. We are a statewide collaborative of parent-run centers. We're the state affiliate of the National Family Voices, and we also serve as California's family-to-family health information center. All of our programming at Family Voices exists to support families of children and youth with special healthcare needs. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, there's our website right there, familyvoicesofca.org. So our webinars serve as statewide trainings on various child health related topics, and they're geared toward a diverse audience of families, youth, providers, professionals, parent-to-parent center staff, and advocates as well. So just a bit about the logistics for today. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can call a 1-800 number. It's 1-800-263, there it is on the screen, 6317. If you get disconnected, just go ahead and sign back in the way that you did the first time. And just so everybody knows, you do start out muted. And if you have any questions, there's a question panel on the webinar viewing platform. You can just type in your question and we'll be able to see those. So go ahead and type any questions that you have into there. Additionally, the recording today, we are recording today's presentation, and it'll be posted on our Family Voices of California website on our webinars page, along with the accompanying PowerPoint. And you can go ahead and look at our past webinars and register for upcoming ones on that same section of our website. And you'll also be receiving a short survey after the webinar, and we'd really love to get your feedback on today's presentation. And now I'm very happy to introduce today's presenter, Christopher Wecks. Chris is a trained independent facilitator in the Self-Determination Program. He spent the last 10 years advocating for his daughter and the children of those around him in special education, IHSS, Medi-Cal and Regional Center. He has occasionally involved himself at state level issues, such as the initial CCS redesign process, and his recent participation in the State Superintendent's Improving Special Education Transition Team, but most of his time is spent locally. Chris's Fridays are often spent at the Oncology Ward at UCSF Children's Oakland, offering resources to families going through brain tumor treatments. And his eldest daughter is a brain cancer survivor. He's also a national peer coach with the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, serving families in a similar capacity. And most importantly, he spends his time at home caring for his children and is excited to finalize the adoptions of his son and his daughter. So I'll go ahead and pass it off now to Chris. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Okay, thank you, Allie. And welcome everyone to the Family Voices of California presentation on self-determination. For those of you listening and or watching this live right now, I just want to congratulate you because I believe you were one of the lucky ones to sign up early enough because we are at capacity. For the benefit of those who weren't able to get on the call today, I'll be referring to some resources so that this presentation stays fresh for the next year and a half or possibly longer. Now, this presentation will be about a fairly radical alternative to traditional regional center services. So, if you or a loved one is a regional center client, listen up, because this might be for you or it might not be your cup of tea. So I encourage you to listen to the whole presentation before taking any action, and I'll explain why a little later. So first, a little about me. Allie went ahead and introduced me, but So I'm not going to go overboard into my history because what our time together needs to focus on is this potentially incredible opportunity for regional center clients and families. So just briefly, about 9.5 years ago, my 2-month-old daughter was suddenly discovered to have a cancerous brain tumor called a glioblastoma. And that same rainy night that we were rushed to Stanford by ambulance and told this news was the night that I and my family were catapulted into the intimidating worlds of Medi-Cal, CCS, special ed, regional center, social security, and the like. So suffice it to say, we were thrown into that world so deep that I had 2 choices: give up on my daughter or lean in and give up on my old life, get training, spend all of my time becoming an advocate for her. And along the way, I became an advocate for other families needing advocacy services in special ed and other institutions that families like ours rely on. Our family has told our daughter's story numerous times, and I won't have time to do that here, but I mention her because she's why I'm here talking to you today. Most importantly, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, which is an independent government body that has advised and crafted the self-determination program, has trained me to be an independent facilitator, which is someone who guides families through the process. The SCDD has also authorized me to use their materials to help families learn about this program. Their only request to me was that I mention them while presenting. So although there are reams and reams of materials that I've sifted through in the months after my training has been distilled into the relevant information you'll see here today, I wanted to mention them and thank them for letting me use their information. So basically, I'm a parent, a professional advocate, and an independent facilitator. Okay, so that's who I am. Now I'd like to know, who are you? We're going to dive into the material, but I wanted to take a quick poll here at the top so that I knew who I'm talking to, and therefore what kind of information I need to focus on to best meet your needs. So I'm going to ask you to take a multiple choice poll, if you don't mind, and you'll see the poll choice options here. If you fit more than one option, just go ahead and respond with the answer that most matches your particular interest in this presentation today. So go ahead and, Ali, if you want to set the poll up to launch. Okay, you should be able to see a poll open option there. And while you're voting, I'll just read out the options aloud so you understand them. So, are you a regional center client or family member interested in self-determination? Are you a staff member from a regional center? Are you a representative from the Department of Developmental Services? Are you a representative from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities? Or are you some other support organization staff interested in this presentation? So go ahead and make your choice if you haven't chosen already. I don't know when we should close this, Ali, but maybe we'll just give it about 10 seconds. Let's see. Okay.
So the poll is closed now. Chris, are you able to see those results?
I am looking. Let's see.
So it looks like, I can go ahead and read them off for you. It looks like 61% answered regional center client or family member interested in self-determination, 8% regional center staff, 2% State Council on Developmental Disabilities staff, and 30% support organization staff.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ali. That's great. And that's mostly what I assumed about who'd attend. So it sounds like a strong presentation focusing on how families can benefit from the self-determination program and how to get started will meet most of the people's needs listening today. But I am going to give time for questions as we move through. So feel free and ask your questions in the chat feature on the presentation tool at any time. I think that's where we do it. And then Ali will be gathering those, and we'll ask them aloud during our Q&A portions, okay? All right. let's move along here. See if there we go. Okay. So I promised some definitions, and there are quite a few of them. The annoying penchant we all have to create acronyms out of literally everything can make for some intimidating material for families. So I'll quickly run through these. But what I recommend you do, if you are able to, is open up a separate tab or window, because I've defined all of these on a single web page that you can reference while we go through the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to give you what's called a bit.ly link, and it's there at the top of this page. You can see it, bit.ly/SDDEFINITIONS. So bit.ly/self-determination definitions, basically. Okay? I hope that's helpful for you. Okay, so now no one fall asleep, because the good stuff is right after this. Ready? Here we go. Important terms for this presentation. The Department of Developmental Services, often called the DDS, is the state department tasked with actually providing individuals with developmental disabilities with supports and services. They do this through a few channels. The largest one, the one that concerns us today, is through one of 21 regional centers. Number 2 here. Regional centers are not the DDS. They are separate nonprofit corporations. What they ideally do is coordinate services that an individual can receive, such as Medi-Cal or IHSS, etc., and then contract with companies that fill in the gaps so that the individual can have a life of their choosing. In short, regional centers are in place to fulfill the vision of the Lanterman Act. Lanterman Act, number 3 here. The Lanterman Act, it's a law. It declares that persons with developmental disabilities have the same legal rights and responsibilities guaranteed to all other persons by federal and state constitutions and laws. And it charges the regional center with advocating for those rights. So how do regional centers do this? They do it by allowing companies to become vendors. That's one way they do it, at least. So number 4 here, vendorization, is the process by which a service provider becomes authorized to provide services to regional center clients. It's sometimes an intimidating or cumbersome process, and we'll talk about why that's a problem in a minute. Now, if you're a regional center client, you should recognize number 5 here, an Individualized Program Plan, often called an IPP. The IPP is a client's formal document created during an IPP meeting specifying the client's goals and the services and supports that the client needs to independently participate in the community. Now, when you or a loved one moves over to self-determination, you'll be responsible for creating a much more extensive additional document called a person-centered plan, which you'll see here as number 6. Strictly speaking, this document merely informs the IPP. It's an advisory document structuring what services and supports the IPP should include, and replacing the service coordinator as someone who might tell you what you need. However, what it really is a life plan for the client. As such, it's a process, and it's an ongoing one. It can talk about all sorts of things: dreams and goals, strengths, likes, dislikes. And writing a great person-centered plan that affirmatively argues for the client's own vision of their life is one crucial step that you're going to have to take if you want to take this dive. So you can enlist family or friends familiar with how to write a plan that is acceptable for regional centers, or you can enlist an independent facilitator like myself to do it. Okay, hang in there, folks. Page 2. So at the top here, State Council on Developmental Disabilities, or the SCDD, is an independent government body, as in not beholden to the governor or any other government entity. It's established to ensure that individuals with developmental disabilities are receiving the services that they need. They provided a lot of guidance on how the self-determination program works and are helping lead meetings at the state and at the local catchment levels to explain and flesh out the program for everyone. Okay, the big one, self-determination. number 2 on this page, and the reason we're all here. So I won't dwell, since we'll spend the rest of our time talking about it and its opportunities, but simply defines self-determination is the fulfilled vision of the Lanterman Act, but as an alternative to traditional regional center services through vendors. Self-determined clients of any age and their families or team manage their own budgets, they hire their own staff, they choose vendored or unvendored clients, and find their own unique supports to meet their vision of their preferred future. And I hope that sounds good to you. An independent facilitator, number 3, is someone like me who's traveled through the SCDD's training forest and come out on the other side ready to assist, generally at no out-of-pocket cost to the client. All services are paid for out of the regional center client's self-determination budget. So it depends on what you employ an independent facilitator for, but you could, for example, say farewell to paying $100 or $200 out of an hour out of pocket for a special ed advocate, for example. It's up to you and your independent facilitator how you want to use them and their services. Now, I said a self-determination client doesn't need to have any vendored service providers, and I sort of just lied a little bit. So an FMS, a financial management service, number 4 here, is the only vendored service a client has to have. The FMS handles the money. The state of California doesn't just deposit a bag full of money on your front lawn. The FMS manages that. Also, the client can have them serve as their employer of record, which is really important for most, and it shields the client from the legal and insurance entanglements that come with hiring, managing, and firing people. So an independent facilitator can help manage your team, but the formal legal stuff, that would be an FMS. An FMS makes sure you're spending your money on the agreed things and provides reporting to you and the regional center at least once a month. Okay, lastly, I've included 2 government services here, Medi-Cal and IHSS. I put those here because I'll reference them later. Medi-Cal and IHSS aren't the central topic today, but all government services like these are important for a self-determination client and their independent facilitator to have a handle on, because a regional center remains, even in the self-determination program, the payer of last resort. That means if Medi-Cal, the state's insurance plan for individuals who have low income or disability, is technically responsible for paying for a service or product, a client has to have them pay for it. If IHSS, in-home supportive services, can provide the client with assistance in the home, a client has to utilize that first. Regional centers call these other agencies, and even free local resources too, generic services, meaning that they are available to everyone who qualifies. It's only the services and products that are paid for by these other avenues that a regional center client, self-determination or not, can receive. This is why it's important to have a strong advocate, be that yourself or a family member or an independent facilitator trained in special ed advocacy or whatever other forms of advocacy you may need as you move through the process. Whew. Okay, we did it. Definitions are done. Let's move on. You can keep that web page open that I mentioned earlier with the definitions, but we're going to quickly move on so we can talk about what we came here for today. But first, I wanted to briefly pause and see if anyone has any questions so far. Bearing in mind, all we've talked about is my brief history and a gamut of definitions. So Pip and Allie, do we have any questions that we won't be addressing in the next section of slides?
I don't see any questions at this time, but I'll make sure to let you know as they pop up.
Okay, great, thank you. So, yeah, so let's see, moving on, let's talk about what regional centers are supposed to do and what they often end up doing. Okay, so in theory, and as I've mentioned, the Lanterman Act is the law that guides the creation of and the purpose for regional centers. What regional centers are supposed to do are to honor individuals with developmental disabilities, but upholding their dignity by acknowledging their equal right to participate in the community and to make their own choices for themselves. So in short, a regional center is supposed to come up with an array of services and supports for each individual client to meet their needs and choices throughout their life. So this is really important. It's not just about the individual's disabilities, their needs, it's also about their choices, which is an affirmational thing if you think about it. We all make choices to the extent that we can. We choose our careers, we choose our religions, we choose our sexual partners, our hobbies, our interests. We choose how we spend our time. We choose what we study, what we say. We choose what filter to use on our Instagram pictures. All of these very important questions. And regional centers are tasked with putting the person and their vision of their future first, and then supporting that vision. So, as such, regional centers are supposed to utilize a value system that includes choice, inclusion, independence, respect, maintaining children in the family home, support for persons with developmental disabilities to become valued members of their community, wherever that is, and whatever that entails. If you take a moment and just think about all of that, you can see just exactly how enormous this law and the role of regional centers really are. It's an enormous ask of any organization. And along the way, regional centers have really done their honest best to fulfill the vision of this law. Still, in the opinion of many, regional centers, through their own sets of systems and procedures, have not fully met the vision of the Lanterman Act as we currently envision it. Now, I want to say up front, there's plenty of regional center folks on the call today, that I love all of you, regional center folks. Regional centers are filled with some of the hardest working, well-intentioned individuals I know who are doing their best to assist their clients using all the tools at their disposal. So they want to see the vision of the Lanterman Act fulfilled. Nobody I've met doesn't want that. No, I don't think any individual is to blame here. But one of the reasons that self-determination has been piloted for nearly the last 20 years and will soon be available to everyone is because lots of people recognize that although lots of money was being spent on clients for an array of services, outcomes for these individuals weren't improving the way that we wanted them to. And as it turns out, money spent wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem was what was happening in real life just wasn't lining up with the theory. So in reality, one, while services and supports are meant to meet the needs and choices of the individual, regional centers have become the ones telling individuals and families what they can receive. They, more often than not, are in the driver's seat. The client should be in the driver's seat, but all too often that's not exactly the case. Two, the array of services and supports intended to actualize everyone's life plans? Not so much. The truth is, regional centers have to vet their contracted support services through a process called vendorization, which I mentioned earlier. The process has the benefit of making sure that a company is safe and reliable, but unfortunately, the process has also had a dampening effect on the quantity and the types of service providers, particularly the small boutique community service providers down your street who, might have helped you or your loved one in a very specific way. Regional centers have developed a few categories of services, and many of you are probably familiar with them. Respite care, behavioral services, diaper services. So these and other products and service categories revolve around the disabilities, but they don't revolve around the individual. So it has to revolve around the disability if you think about it. A regional center being in the driver's seat, trying to meet everyone's needs, has to choose the common denominator between everyone, and that's the disabilities. It's a menu of options, but it's not an open-ended exploration of the individual's choices. So what I view self-determination as is an effort to try and do better. And I think it might be helpful to illustrate this distinction. So let's take a look at 3 hypothetical individuals and how their needs might be better met through self-determination. Okay, at the top here, Shannon. Shannon wants to be an artist, okay? Shannon has cerebral palsy, and the cerebral palsy, and that gives her access to regional center services. Let's just say that's the case. So she talks to her caseworker about her challenges pursuing her interest in art. The community college art classes, they don't meet her level of need. She needs someone who can adapt traditional art implements and tailor their instruction to her needs so that she can be the artist that she wants to be. All right, number 2, Jerome. Jerome's into working out. He'd love to take a class at his local gym in the morning, like everyone else. And, you know, technically he probably could. However, he runs a small but significant risk of having a seizure on the bus ride there, or maybe in the short trek from the bus stop to the gym. The wheelchair helps, but he might need an aide to escort him there. And who's going to show up for him at 7:30 in the morning like he prefers for a 4-hour shift for, I don't know, what is it now, $12.75 an hour? And, you know, forgetting about that, the class in the gym's not really set up for him to comfortably get in, get dressed, shower. The class itself isn't tailored to meet some of his physical limitations. His home, on the other hand, is set up for all of this. So why does he have to waste 3 to 4 hours of his life to take a 40-minute class down at the gym? Number 3, let's talk about Claudia. So Claudia was introduced to the ritual of going and getting a latte at the coffee shop recently. And now it's the highlight of her day whenever she gets to go do that. Her family takes her. They help speak for her. They help order for her. They help tell her where to stand in relation to other people also waiting for their coffee. They help her get to a table or wait for one appropriately if all the tables are full. They help show her when it's her turn to take her coffee, help her manage the close spaces she shares at the condiment table so that, you know, she can pour the sugar in and mix it in just the way she likes to. It's a whole ritual. It's her thing. She'd like to be able to do it more often, but her family doesn't always have the hour it takes to sit at the coffee shop. Not to mention, it's kind of exhausting for them to do this every time. And anyway, it's fair to ask, I think, why Claudia isn't permitted to do this herself if she wants to, right? I mean, some people might say Claudia exhibits behavioral issues when in close proximity to strangers. Behavioral issues is a nice catch-all to obscure the reality here, which is that she's just really overwhelmed and anxious. Okay, so here we have 3 individuals, right? 3 regional center clients. 3 individuals with, I'm sure, a number of different hopes and dreams, only one of which I've mentioned for each person here for simplicity. 3 people who, and I'll use the key language again here, whose needs and choices would be supported by an array of services and supports. So in theory here, we have 3 key test cases for regional center actualizing the vision of the Lanterman Act, right? So what would a traditional regional center offer Shannon to address her desire to become an artist? Well, I came up with 3 ideas for what a caseworker might offer. First of all, Shannon needs adaptive equipment. She can request it, and we can hope that there is a vendor in the area willing and able to work with Shannon to provide artistic implements that she needs to perform like her peers. Now, I'm doubtful that we'll find a vendor that can do this, but it's something that we can explore. Second, a catch-all offer is often respite. The reasoning, I think, in this case might be that there's let's see. Yeah, so we can request respite care. Why would we request respite care? Oh, the reasoning here is that, you know, a family member or a friend, this person who probably takes care of Shannon, maybe they can go to the art class with Shannon. Now, meanwhile, later on, they can be provided some respite in order to, you know, let that family member or caretaker do a load of laundry or whatever it is that they need to do. And a third option I discovered, or I thought of here, regional centers can provide potentially a one-to-one aid. And maybe that might work, But again, there's the challenges of scheduling and the pay rate that one-to-one aides would receive through a service like this. Okay, sorry, I stumbled a little bit. I'm not going to slow us up on our presentation here by talking through the rationale for every traditional service for the other two individuals, but you see them here, and maybe you have an idea or two that will work that I haven't thought of, okay? Maybe, and then maybe, like so many others who have concluded, you might say that these are square pegs trying to fit into round holes. You might wonder why a regional center that's supposed to tailor its solutions to meet the needs and wishes of its clients doesn't just allow those individuals to do exactly what they need. Well, the self-determination program could do this. Shannon might hire an art teacher who can come and give her lessons and advise on local art supply companies who might tailor make some equipment for her. So with no vendor restrictions holding her back, Shannon can access the wide world of possibilities that are available in her greater community. If it exists, Shannon can write this into her plan and execute it with her own budget. Jerome, he doesn't need respite camp like I was thinking a particular camp that might focus on fitness. He doesn't necessarily need a one-to-one aide. It might work for him. He could instead hire a personal trainer to come to his house. I was at a self-determination advisory meeting 2 months ago with the San Andreas Regional Center, and an individual named Shannon, who runs a home personal training company called Gym Guys with the Z, came. His team comes to people's homes with his tricked out van, and it has literally any equipment you could want inside. They bring it all inside. They focus on your fitness goals and preferences. It was very impressive to see this individual at this meeting. Companies like this exist, and now regional center clients like Jerome could access them. So for Claudia, what did I come up with? I thought Claudia might benefit from a trained social coach and companion. This is someone who teaches life skills, and these people exist. This person could ride the Uber over to the coffee shop with Claudia several times a week, let's say. They'd coach her on the way to manage the anxiety-producing moments in her quest for that sit down and that perfect latte. They'd hang out with Claudia. Maybe they're Claudia's companion. Maybe they can just sit and chat together. Or maybe this person fosters Claudia's ability to make friends of her own at the coffee shop. So these social coaches exist, and now regional center clients could access them. So these are just some ideas for hypothetical individuals. You get the idea, and I hope that it begins to give you a taste for what's possible. It's a taste of what you might be able to do if you take the reins of the planning process and the spending plan. And that's what self-determination is all about. Okay, so we'll stop for a second. We'll stop in a second for questions, but just to summarize this section, self-determination puts the regional center client and their family in the driver's seat again. With this comes the responsibility to come up with one's own plan and a greater vision of what they want to see about their life, okay? It also opens up the wide world of possibilities that we can dream of to make our hopes and dreams a reality. Under self-determination, a regional center client writes a plan, hires and fires their own team, finds products and services, trains their team, manages a budget, and most centrally, self-determination is an optional program that attempts to correct for the restrictive lack of supports and services that traditional regional centers offer by putting those budgets and those choices in the hands of the families that use them. So, like I said, we'll stop for questions again now. Let's see. Sorry about that. And I'm anticipating there might be a few at this point. Some of the things that we have coming up in the last section will be why you might not want to pursue the self-determination program, some of the requirements for participating, how an independent facilitator like myself could help you, and then the conclusion with some further resources. So, Allie, are we getting any questions yet that we need to address?
Yeah, we have a few questions. I'll start with the first, which is, can you please give some examples on how self-determination can help with post-secondary education and employment?
let's see, post-second.
And any questions that we have that aren't able to be answered today, because there are a lot coming in, we'll definitely send a follow-up email to Chris, and we'll get those answers to everyone, just so everybody knows.
I sure will, and I would like to answer all of these questions more fully anyway. So if anybody, at the end, I'm going to give my contact information. So I'm not necessarily an on-the-fly kind of person. This presentation thing is a little new to me, but I am a good researcher, and that's why I've sort of taken on this role. What comes to mind as an answer immediately, and this is just one thing that comes to mind, is a job coach could fall under the category of services provided by a self-determination program. So a job coach could be someone that helps you write a resume. It gives you interview skills. It's someone who could even help you do research on finding the right kind of career or profession for you. All of this could fall under the program. Literally anything can fall in the program as long as it's not covered under other service categories that are already free and accessible, generic services like I've called before. So the answer to the question would really revolve around the individual. What specific challenges are you having? Are you having trouble getting into a school of your choice? Well, let's talk about what's keeping you from doing that. Is it your grades? Is this a school issue? In which case we would have to address it through school services first. And then if that isn't the reason, then we would dip into the regional center budget as a mechanism for giving you the additional support that you need. Like I said, the job coach is the thing that comes to mind on the fly, but I'd love to answer this question more fully for the individual later on if they want to contact me, and I'll give my contact info at the end.
Great, thank you. We'll make sure to get the two of you connected. There are several more questions. I'll go ahead and ask a couple more, and then we'll move on. The first is, just to be clear, self-determination applies to all ages of clients, even birth to 3. I'll let you answer that one. And then the second question is, what sort of protections are in place for individuals now that the vendorization process is not a part of that process through self-determination specifically?
Those are great questions, and I don't think I answered either of them further on, so I appreciate you all asking them. The answer to the first question, is self-determination a program that is available to regional center clients of any age, regardless of how old they are? And they specifically asked, I think, 0 to 3. I think the reason why the individual asked that is because many individuals are not standard regional center clients. They fall under early intervention services. So there are individuals who qualify for proper regional center services 0 to 3. You can become a regional center client before you're 3 years old. However, if you're merely receiving early intervention services under that category of service, no, you would not be eligible for the self-determination program. But a 0 to 3-year-old who is a proper regional center client would, yes, be able to participate in the self-determination program, and any age thereafter as well. So minors, any child, anyone over the age of 18, anyone of any age who is a regional center client can participate in the self-determination program when it becomes available next year, which we'll talk about later on. The second question was about protections for the client when it comes to the non-vendored services. And the answer to that question is a little open-ended at this point. Certain types of protections do exist when it comes to the protections against employee lawsuits. Let's say if an employee is injured in the workplace helping you do something, it depends on how you choose your financial management service, okay? The FMS, like I said, is going to be the one required vendor service that you're going to have, and there are multiple service categories that you can opt in for with an FMS. They cost more, but I highly recommend often an FMS that will provide co-employer services, which means that they will be the technical employer of record. Similar to the listener is aware of this, the way a respite agency is the employer of record for a respite care worker. So the respite care worker, let's say they get injured, or let's say they have a suit against, they have some sort of a workplace suit. The financial liability for that generally will fall on the financial management service in this case. You can actually opt out of that. You can choose to utilize an FMS that merely pays the bills, and then you truly are the employer. This, of course, incurs you with the liability of being an employer. So you need to appropriately hire and fire. The decisions you make have to fall within legal guidelines. You have to be aware of policies against discrimination when you're hiring, and other things. So the short answer is there is a lot less protection for you depending on how you choose your FMS. Other sorts of things, like let's say the product is faulty, or the service provider doesn't actually provide the services. I'm thinking of like a failed product scenario. A lot of this will fall on the individual. This becomes a lot more self-responsibility than maybe some regional center clients are prepared to take on. And like I said, in a minute, we'll talk about why self-determination might not be a good idea for you. You have the freedom, but you also have a lot more responsibility to follow up and insist upon the product being provided, for example. Now, an FMS is going to assist with that a bit too. They're going to ensure that payments only go through if a service or a support is appropriately provided. Kind of a half answer, and again, it really depends on the details.
No, yeah, thank you so much. I think that answered kind of both sides of that question, so we appreciate it. And I think we can go ahead and move on. I know there are several more questions, and as I said, we'll make sure that Chris gets those and everybody gets the answers to the questions that they've asked.
Okay, thanks, Allie. So everyone, we'll move on to the last section of our presentation. So up to this point, I've clearly been kind of an evangelist for the self-determination program. I'm a big fan of the idea. I think it might help a lot of people as long as they go about it the right way. But I think it's important to note that it might not be for everyone. So there is a lot more to manage with self-determination. And I would hate to see a family weighed down with overwhelm and burdened by this program, especially if, they're reasonably happy with their regional center services, or if regional center services don't really form a big part of the client's life. So here are some of the big challenges families I've talked to have had with self-determination during the last 17 years as this program has been piloted, and particularly in the last few years when the pilot has expanded to 2,500 individuals across the state. So first, the person-centered plan has to be written effectively and persuasively. A PCP can, and they have been rejected as the basis of an IPP meeting. So finding someone equipped to write the plan or doing the deep research necessary to do it well yourself is an important step in making self-determination work for you. Second, the menu disappears, okay? This is liberating, yes, but it can also leave a vacuum for you, a gap in its place. If you don't know what you need or how to find it, this can be a big stumbling block. So it's just something to think about. Third, you're responsible for your team. If you hire someone, you need to show them what to do. You need to hold them accountable to showing up to work on time. They will be effectively your employee, and some people don't like that idea. They want someone else to do all of that for them. Okay, fourth, you have to appropriately manage your budget. The FMS will tell you if you've run out of money, but you need to manage how you spend it through the year. You have to carefully determine how to allocate your budget to services and supports and when to do that. You can run out of money. You can also underutilize your budget, which will negatively impact your budget in the following year. This is a planning process, okay? So it involves thinking about the whole year, and it means making budget allocation estimates. Fifth, and this is true of standard regional center client services too, you have to effectively advocate for, again, what are called generic services. So to define that again, a generic service is any service that is readily accessible to anyone in the community. If a regional center client has Medi-Cal, and Medi-Cal can pay for something, it has to pay for it. You can't option in to have your self-determination budget cover something that something else covers. Regional centers remain in self-determination what is called the payer of last resort, meaning every other means of free and public payment or subsidy must be explored first. This isn't just government services either. If a local community offers a free or a subsidized resource of some sort, that also is a generic resource, and it must be utilized before a comparable self-determination asset pays for that service. So some people might consider this a hassle, and it is. It's a hassle. But the reason it's a pain in the butt is because we all know how difficult it is to line up our services the way we want them to. It's exhausting to advocate for special education. It's exhausting to advocate for Medi-Cal, for CCS, for IHSS, and so forth. On the one hand, we might love the idea of not having to do any of that advocating anymore. Self-determination has all you could want inside, right? They bring it all in and focus on your fitness goals and preferences. It's very impressive. Companies like, oh, I'm sorry, I've replaced my slide. Hold on, sorry, just a moment. So I was saying that it's exhausting to have to advocate for all these services. And jokingly, I was going to say that, self-determination has freed me from having to deal with all those horrible bureaucratic institutions, right? Begone denial of service letters. Farewell annual reevaluations. I have self-determination now. Woohoo! So unfortunately not. That's not the case. On the one hand, that's true. It's not the case. You still have to advocate for all those other services. Okay, but on the other hand, a trainer that I met made a very valid point at the last training I went to. Under self-determination, you have a limited budget. So this budget can only go so far. So if you think about it, why would you want to have that budget spent on services that another agency will pay for free? Why squander that self-determination budget on things that you can get for free, right? So the consolation to having to continue to fight for services elsewhere is at least your budget will remain effectively used. Okay, so lastly here, some people's budgets just don't warrant self-determination. A self-determination budget has to be at least large enough to cover the costs of paying the financial management service, the FMS. And yes, you have to pay for them too. So depending on what you choose to have your FMS do for you, like managing the legal and insurance pieces of hiring and firing someone, or not, this means that somewhere between $50 and $165 per month will go to the FMS alone. If a client uses, relatively little in the way of a regional center services, their budget might not even support a transition to self-determination. So to find out if your budget would support self-determination or not, you can look at your own regional center statement of services provided, okay? That's what it's called, the statement of services provided, which you should get annually, but you can request at any time from your caseworker. And if you'd like help with that, I'd be happy to figure that out with you. Okay, so I've listed a few reasons not to do self-determination here. And even though I may have maybe deflated your balloon momentarily, my next slide is intended to blow it back up. So let's ride the roller coaster. Ready? Okay. No one goes through life planning their goals all by themselves. We all get help. We enlist family, friends, and professionals to assist in our decision-making. Most of the problems in the last slide can be overcome with some help. Self-determination isn't about doing everything literally yourself. It's just about taking responsibility for getting the help that you do need. So, who can be on an IPP team meeting and who can help write a person-centered plan? Anyone you want. The independent facilitator role was specifically created with the requirements that they are able to do most of the things in the last page. A good independent facilitator should be able to write a person-centered plan and advocate for it in an IPP meeting, find services in the community, help manage a team, a spending plan, a budget, and a good independent facilitator should be able to assist with advocacy on those generic services too, the Medi-Cal, the special ed, etc. All of this gets built into your self-determination budget. And a good independent facilitator or anyone good at this process can help design a budget that helps take care of all of this. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the independent facilitator role since it's slightly more mysterious than saying family and friends can help you. So the basic state requirements of an independent facilitator are that they have to go through formal training with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, the SCDD, to provide person-centered planning services. So my view on this is that an individual who, sort of narrowly speaking, assists in getting services approved by the regional center in the self-determination process is indeed a definition of an independent facilitator. But more broadly speaking, it's a person who can think about the big picture. So step back for a second, everybody. Let's get rid of all of the requirements and the walls and the vendors and just like how we game the system, how we make the system work for us. Get rid of all of that. What does a person need and want for their life? Just what do you need and want for your life? Question number 2, what supports will that person need to take care of those needs and wants? Oh, I mean, a lot of basic things come to mind. Housing, medical care, food, work, school, fun, social life. I mean, we can talk about everything. It should be someone, an independent facilitator, should be someone who's willing to dive into another person's world and assist them where it's needed. So that often means being an advocate for those other agencies, getting the housing or the medical care or the other pieces. And it means writing a good plan that really encapsulates the individual's whole dream for their future, what they need and what they want. I think that a good independent facilitator means being an advocate for other agencies. And that's why my background in advocacy has made me well suited for this role, because I've historically been a special ed and agency advocate. And that's what an independent facilitator should be doing with a client, in my opinion. The culminating elements of this usually revolve around a plan, including a spending plan, as well as the hunt so additionally ongoing, an independent facilitator can hunt for new services and supports as needed. And you know what? I'm sorry, I read all of that on the wrong slide. I didn't move forward one. So I'll give us a minute on that slide, but I basically stated it. Okay, so we're close to the end, and I've mentioned what an independent facilitator does. So I'm going to move along just to keep this brief. I'm sorry to spend so little time on this slide, but we are close to the end. So if you're interested in self-determination and you want to move forward, what do you do? Well, first of all, if you were lucky enough to be lottery selected for the phase-in process, coming off of the pilot program, then you should have been one of the 2,500 program participants to receive a letter from your regional center telling you what to do, which will include attending a self-determination class, writing a PCP, and hiring an FMS, okay? What do other regional center clients have to do to be a part of this program? Well, currently the phase-in, the 2,500 people I mentioned from the coming off of the pilot program is in its last of a 3-year cycle, okay? By the last check-in that I saw, I see that by May of next year, May of 2021, everyone in the state who is a regional center client will be allowed to choose to opt into the self-determination program, again, regardless of their age. So this is very exciting. Now, as people have opted out of the self-determination program, slots have opened up. Most of these newly opened up slots, these 2,500 slots I mentioned, were again already chosen by lottery. But I always say it doesn't hurt to be vocal with your caseworker about your interest. So if you're interested now, let your caseworker know now, even if there's no slots available, even if you're told, sorry, there's no available slots until it opens up next year. So even if you still have to wait for May of 2021, you can choose to hold. So the other reason, sorry, that you would want to tell your regional center caseworker now is, by May of next year, 2021, everyone will be allowed in, and you can hold an early IPP meeting. You can ask for an early IPP meeting so that you can move in that direction right away, instead of waiting to your IPP annual date if you get annually reevaluated, let's say. Okay? And this is just a reality of the system. With it being over a year away, you might be saying, I don't know why I'm even here right now. Why am I listening to something that isn't going to be available for a year and several months? And the reason why I'm starting to talk about this now with Family Voices and other groups is because next year, when the floodgates open up and everyone starts participating in this, there's just not, I'm just going to be frank, there probably aren't going to be enough supports in place for all the people opting into this program. This is just my personal prediction. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. So if you think you're going to want support from an independent facilitator or other support providers, I'd advise that you start thinking about locking those in before the wait lists get kind of crazy. My website has a simple opt-in to put you in line on a wait list. So if you're interested in working with me, you can do that. No pressure, obviously. Again, for the benefit of those who didn't get to hear this live, for those listening after the fact, I'll keep the web links the same. So you should be able to access them too. I'll have to prioritize current self-determination clients, of course, but if you opt in now, you'll preserve your place in line, so to speak. Okay, so that's it. And hopefully we've ended up with enough time to get in some more questions. But if you didn't get your question answered today, or if you think of one later, or just are more comfortable emailing me directly, please feel free to do that. My email is down there below, chris@aboundservices.com. If you'd like to chat about helping you go through the self-determination process and on your way, I'll advise that you fill out the interest form on the same site as the web definitions that I gave you earlier, or below you see that website. It's aboundservices.com. I think that's it. So, Allie, how are we doing on time? Hello?
Hi, sorry, Chris. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
We do have a couple questions and a couple minutes, so I'll give you the first one. As a parent, can I advocate for my adult son who is a regional center client?
You absolutely can advocate for your adult client who is a regional center. If the question is, can you advocate for your son? You absolutely can. You can advocate for your son. I think we said adult son, so there would be some murky business there if you were to be a paid independent facilitator. I don't know the situation around your adult son. If your son were a minor, the answer would be definitely no. You cannot be a paid independent facilitator, but you can always be an advocate on behalf of anyone, including your son. Yes.
Great, thank you. And then I'm going to go ahead and ask one more question. We have about 45 seconds left. Is there a recommended amount of money to request if a person is wanting to get involved in this? And do you request an amount, or is an amount given to you as far as the budget for that IPP?
Great question, and I have some after presentation resources here. Here's a slide. Take a look at this. An annual budget is basically what you spent last year with regional center services, and not what you were given last year, mind you, not what you actually ended up spending. So I gave the example here. You see, e.g., a client used $10,000 in respite and $20,000 in ABA services last year. The starting budget that they will have will be $30,000. That's the standard line. Now, there are a number of reasons why you could advocate for a higher budget and why you may even get a lower budget. Certain things like unmet needs, we didn't get the services that we'd requested because there was a wait list or whatever, so we feel like that should be a part of the budget too. New needs, changing circumstances, etc. All of that can change the budget, and someone well-versed in the program can help you advocate for that increased budget.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's about time to wrap up, so I just wanted to thank everybody for taking some time to be on our webinar today, learn about self-determination. Just a reminder that we will have a short survey sent out after this. Make sure to fill that out for us so we know how we did. Thank you so much, Chris, and remember that the recording and the slides will be emailed out to you, and it also will be made available on our website. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.